there, welcome to my channel. So today's tutorial is on how to make this beautiful top you're seeing here. I made mine a bit longer, like a mini dress, and the major design is just a symmetric neckline with ropes tied on one side. So please do well to watch this video to the end. Like, share, subscribe. This is going to be a very quick tutorial, and let us get on with it. So I have my pattern drafted out here. So this pattern was drafted on a fold, and from the top I have my starting line, next my chest line, bust point, waistline, hip line, and the full length. Now if you're just going to be making a blouse, you might want to stop at your hip line or a bit above your hip line. If it's a crop top, maybe a little below your waistline. So you just work with the length that suits you. Now I used a neck width of 3 inches. From the folded edge of this paper, I went in by 3 inches on the top. I marked down 1 inch for my shoulder slant. I drew out my armhole curve. On the chest line, I have my bust circumference measurement divided by 4, my waist circumference on my waistline, hip circumference on my hip line, and on the full length I marked in about 1 inch just to give it a penciled effect. Now this pattern does not have any allowance, so the only part that has a little allowance is the waistline. So my waist circumference measurement divided by 4 is 8 inches. So the allowance I have on this side is an extra 1 inch, which is for my dart intake. So that is the only extra allowance I added to the waistline. But the rest of the other measurements, my chest, bust point, hip, does not have any allowance, and this full length I said I went inwards by about 1 inch or 1.25 inches just to give it a penciled effect. Now remember I said this pattern was drafted out on a fold, so when I turn it over to this side, it has the exact same measurement, and I've drawn it out here as well. So I'm just going to proceed to cut everything out. Now when I get to the armhole here, I'm going to only cut out one armhole, so the armhole of one side. I'm just going to cut out the right side of the armhole, and I'll leave the left armhole there for now. Then I'm going to also cut out the shoulder slope for one side here also. And now I'm done with that, I'm just going to turn this back to the main part. Before I go on to work on the asymmetric neckline, I'm going to first of all take off the dart here. So I won't be closing this with a sellotape. I'm just going to extract the dart or remove the dart from the side. So the dart allowance here is 1 inch. I'm going to measure in 1 inch on the waistline, and now my dart starts 1 inch below the bust point line. So I'm going to mark where the dart starts on the side, and the dart ends 1 inch above the hip line. So I'm going to mark 1 inch above the hip line on the side. I'm going to use my ruler to just connect from the waistline into this bust point line at the top, and I'll use my curve ruler to take from the waistline into the hip line on the side. Just blend it in nicely like this, and then I'll use my scissors to just cut it out. Now that this little piece is out, I'm just going to go on to just X this dart line so that we know that we no longer have to close the dart because we have removed it on the side. I'm going to also exit on this other side. I'll use my marker to just indicate that the darts are gone. Now to work on this symmetric neckline, I'll open up our pattern, and you can see it is divided into two. So I'll go on to label one side right and the other side left. Now I want my full shoulder to be on the right side and the other half part to be on the left side. Ordinarily, when you're cutting out an asymmetric neckline, you're just going to start from the shoulder of one side into the armhole of the other side, but now I don't want to take off the entire armhole of the left side, so I'm just going to make some adjustments to this armhole part here. Now from the shoulder slope, I'm going to come down by 4 inches. So I'm marking 4 inches from the shoulder slope on the armhole curve right here, and from this 4 inches I'm going to go out by 1.5 inches. Now you can make it more than 1.5 inches. You can go out by about 2 inches or 3 inches. Now from that 1.5 inches I went out by, I'm going to come down by 2 inches, and then I'll use my ruler to just square this up. So I'm going to just connect from the side into the armhole curve downwards, and then from these 2 inches I came below, I'm going to just take it straight to the armhole curve as well. I'm using my razor to just erase out the part that I'm not going to cut off. I know it is not even so visible, and now I'm just going to proceed to make my curve. So from the shoulder point on the right side, I just made a slight curve downwards into half of the armhole on the left side. Now that I have cut that out, this little extension I made on the armhole of the left side is just to make the rope blend with the main fabric. I don't know if you get me. And you can decide to not add this extension and just make yours a straight or full asymmetric curve, and then just attach your ropes to that point and the same point at the back. It's still going to come out nicely, except that the rope might just be dragging the neckline a bit. So this is the fabric I used. I think this is lycra, but it's a bit thicker than lycra, and I made use of just 1 yard of fabric. So this fabric is very stretchy, and I'm not going to bother attaching zipper to it because it's very easy to put on. And I'm going to be using the same pattern to cut out the front and the back because it's exactly the same thing. Now I've placed my fabric open here, and the length of my pattern, if I didn't mention, is 34.5 inches. Now my fabric is slightly shorter, so everything I used in total was about 32 inches. That was the length of the dress. Now I've placed the pattern paper on the right side of this fabric, not on the wrong side, on the right side. And I've gone on to add allowance to the top and the neckline. So the top, that's the shoulder, and the neckline. I did not add any allowance to the armhole part or the other armhole that I made some alterations because I don't want to have issues when I'm sewing it, and this fabric is also stretchy, so a lot of things can slide. So if you're making use of a fabric that is not as stretchy, please do well to add your allowances when necessary. Now I'm just going to trim off this part here, this other armhole, and now I'll proceed to cut out the back. So I'll be using the front piece to cut out the back piece. So I've opened up my fabric again, and the part facing up is the front part of the fabric, that's the right side. I'm going to place the front piece I've already cut out on the right side of this back piece. I'm placing right side on right side. So I was trying to just label it out here, but my chalk wasn't so visible. So I'm just going to place the front piece on the back piece, right sides together. So I think this is the easiest way to cut out an asymmetric design so that you avoid mistakes in the future. Just place it right side on right side. I'm just going to follow the exact shape because it already has the allowances I need, and I'm just going to cut it out. Now I've cut that out, I'll use the little piece of fabric I have left to cut out lining pieces for the front and the back. For the back piece, I'm just going to cut out the lining to just go a little below the armhole because I want to fully enclose this armhole. I just cut it to go a little below the armhole. And now for the front, because I just want to thicken this fabric, to thicken the dress a bit, I made sure that the lining for the front just went to the full length of this dress. So the fabric was enough to line the front part. Now I've cut out my ropes here. I've already folded them in. So the width of my ropes on a fold are about 1 inch, 1.25 inches. I wanted them to be at least 1.5 inches or even 2 inches, but this is what my fabric could carry. The ropes were the last thing I cut out. Now for the length of the ropes, they are about 20 inches in length. So please do well to make your adjustments. Now I'm going to go over to turn the neckline and the armhole of the front first. So I've placed the lining on the main fabric right side together. I'm going to sew along the neckline. I'll sew the armhole, the full armhole. And now for this half altered armhole, I'm going to first of all place the rope, one of the ropes, between the lining and the main fabric on this extension. So I'm basically just placing the rope on the right side of the fabric, that is inside between the lining and the main fabric piece. So I'm placing it on that extended part that I have there on the small armhole. Now I'm just going to sew everything. So I'm going to sew from the neckline to this extension. I'm going to sew on the rope, and then I'm going to sew it down into the other little armhole I have to the side. I'm going to also sew this other armhole as well. Now for the back piece, I'm placing the main fabric piece here. I'm just going to place the rope on it first so that you can see it more visibly. Placing the rope right there on the right side, and I'm going to place the lining piece on top of it. Now I've just pinned the top, and I've pinned where the rope is to secure it in place. I'm going to sew the neckline, and I'm also going to sew this armhole part. Now this is the front piece after sewing the neckline, the little armhole, and this other full armhole. Now for the back piece, I sewed the neckline, the little armhole, and I did not sew the full armhole on the back piece. Now I've turned them over to the right side, and I'm going to place them right sides facing each other, and I'm going to use this full armhole part of the back side to fully enclose the shoulders of the front and the back. So the lining piece of the back side, I'm just going to turn it over to the front piece, just directly over the shoulders. I'm just going to arrange them properly. I'm going to make a straight stitch on the shoulder part there, and making sure that the lining of the back piece fully goes over the shoulder. I'll arrange the armholes of the back piece, that is the lining and the main fabric. I'll arrange the armholes together this way. I'll make a straight stitch at the top, and then I'm going to sew these armholes together so they are placed right sides facing. This is it after sewing it. I'm just trying to fully enclose the armhole of the back as well. I'll trim off the little edge at the top and turning it over to the right side. You can see how nice and neat it looks at the shoulder, inside and outside. Now to shape up the sides, I've placed the front and the back right sides facing. Now remember that the lining of the front piece is the same length as the main fabric pieces. So I'm going to use the lining of the front piece to fully enclose this dress. So first of all, I'll place the front and the back pieces together, right sides facing. I'm going to sew the sides with 1 inch. I did not add any allowance to this, and I'm also taking off 1 inch from it because this fabric is that stretchy. So after shaping up the sides, I'm going to bring the lining of the front and place it over these front and back pieces here, and then I'm also going to sew the sides of the lining to the main pieces. So I'm just going to sew it just right beside the other stitch, the main stitch that is joining the front and the back pieces together. And if you're not making use of a lining, or your lining is not long enough, you can just shape up the sides normally and maybe finish it by weaving it on the inside. Now this is my dress after shaping up the sides. The first stitch I have there is the main stitch joining the front and the back, and the second stitch there is the lining of the front that are fully enclosed. Now I'm just going to put my hand through that part, drag it inside and turn it over to the front. So this is the right side of this dress. Everything is almost done. When I turn it over to the wrong side, this is the part you easily see, the part that is going to be touching your body when you put it on. See how neatly enclosed and nicely finished it is on the inside. I have some pieces of paper around these stitches here because it was very difficult to sew this dress, so I had to use paper to sew it because the fabric is stretchy. The armholes, the shoulder and the neckline, they are nicely enclosed and looking neat. Now for the shoulder part here, you can decide to leave it like this if you want, but I want to just twist it a little bit, so I'm just going to fold it in, I think about 2 times. Just fold it in twice and maybe just make a stitch to secure it at the top. So I'm just going to twist the shoulder a little bit. You can also make some pleats at the top here if you want, and you can decide to just leave it straight as it is. Just depends on your preference. So this is everything for this dress. Thank you so much for watching this video. Please do well to like, share, subscribe, comment if you have any questions, and I'll see you in my next one.